Alright, ladies and gents, welcome back. It's your boy Rocco Yaps. Today I'm gonna be doing a video that's gonna be pretty new on my channel, where I long story short, I play matchmaking in a way. I explain how the current state of a fight, not a fight, but like the current state of a whole division, and what the future holds for it and what I hope the future could have, or possibilities of the future could have. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And obviously, as you can see from the title and the thumbnail, the division we're talking about is the division that, in my opinion, is the number one division in boxing right now. It's the 154-pound division, you know, junior, middleweight, super welterweight, whatever you call it. The 154-pound division to me is the best division going on right now. It's the most exciting. It's the most action-packed. It's the one with interesting matchups and matchmaking to be made. Champion versus champion, champion versus non-champion, non-champion versus non-champion, contenders, prospects, the ex-champions, champions. The list goes on and on. You know, this division has it all. And then you have the fools who are 147 who are, you know, waiting around at the idea of going up to 154. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I want to make this a recurring theme in my channel where I kind of I play matchmaking, and 154 is the first division, the debuting of my, this segment that I'm going to be doing on my channel. Now, in order to talk about the present and especially the future, I have to enlighten you about the past that brought us here. You know what I mean? So let me tell you a little bedtime story for you fools. The year is 2024. Crawford just did the jump to 154 after defeating Earl Spence. He has gone to the ring, gone the distance in a very intense matchup with Israel Madrimov, who at the current time was 10 wins, 7 knockouts, 1 defeat, 1 draw, and actually he didn't have a defeat. He only had the 1 draw. That's the closest he was to defeat. But he was the WBA world champion. Terence Crawford moves up to 154, doesn't take a tune-up, says I want Madrimov. Beats Madrimov in a very tough match to become the new WBA 154-pound world champion. After this, he decides to really push hard for the Canelo fight. And obviously that led to a whole year of him not doing anything at 154 and just strictly preparing and training for the jump to 168. Now, for the other belt, you have Mortazaliev, who had just become, also in that year, the IBF world champion at 23 victories, 17 by knockout, no defeats, no draws. And he was preparing to defend his title against Tim Tszyu, which he ended up knocking out in the 3rd or 4th round of that title defense. And then you have Sebastian Fundora, who is the WBO and the WBC world champion after defeating Tim Tszyu in their unification bout. Now, Fundora ends up fighting Tim again. It goes worse for Tim in the rematch. My opinion, he jumped the gun a little. But you see, during this time, the division starts to build up. You have Bohacek, who's just already there as a killing machine with 25 victories, 24 by knockout, only 1 defeat. He's going up against Virgil Ortiz, who's at the time 21 victories, 21 by knockout, 0 defeats, 0 draws. You know, he barely manages to squeeze a victory against Bohacek. Bohacek, still being a killing machine, is still out there. So you have Tim Tszyu, who despite his 2 knockout losses to 2 high-level champions, he's still a top 10 guy in the division. Israel Madrimov is still a top 10 guy in the division despite losing to Terence Crawford, not being world champion anymore. But then after Fundora beats Tim Tszyu to not reclaim, but to maintain his titles as the WBC and WBO world champion, he decides to have two fights. Now, he looks good, but the second one is the more interesting one, where it was supposed to be against Xander Zayas. Xander Zayas being the highest ranking prospect across all boards at 154. Puerto Rican top rank star, absolutely coming, damn, bro. My bad for that shit. But, he's coming in hot in the rankings. He wants all the big names. He wants anybody and everybody. Doesn't matter if they're champions or not. But he's specifically calling out Fundora because the WBO decides to make Xander Zayas the mandatory challenger. Now, Fundora, for some reason, you guys could say he was scared. You guys could say whatever you want. He doesn't do that fight. He instead ups to fight Keith Thurman. Keith, the one-time Thurman, the legend at 147. He's now 154. Had one good fight at 154 in Australia where he knocked out this knockout prospect. He dominated him before knocking him out. He wants Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman was originally going to fight Tim Tszyu, though. And, Keith Thurman had a bicep injury, and that's why we had Sebastian Fundora fight Tim Tszyu. So he decides, hey, I'll give Xander Zayas my belt. I'd rather defend my title against someone like Keith Thurman. So he's now only the WBC world champion against Keith Thurman. And the WBO has Xander Zayas fight Ramos to crown themselves the new WBO world champion at 154. Now, 2025, where we're leading up to us, you had the WBA towards the end decide to strip Terence Bud Crawford and give it to pretty much give it to that fool. They elevated that motherfucker. Abrao, or I don't know how to really say his name. He's like a German African dude. He got elevated to WBA world champion status after becoming the interim champ. Mortazaliev is still the IBF champion at 2025. Fundora was about to defend his WBC world titles, but he ended up being the one that got injured in camp, so his fight with Keith Thurman had to get extended. Xander Zayas was, having that fight with Ramos. And then we are here in the current world championship status. Now, the current state of the world championship belts at 154 lies between these three gentlemen that you have right here in front of you. The WBC world champion in Sebastian, the towering Inferno Fundora, with 23 victories, 15 by knockout, 1 defeat, 1 draw. Then you have the WBO and the WBA world champion in Xander Zayas with 23 victories, 13 by knockout, 0 defeats, 0 draws. Then you have the newly crowned champion in the IBF world champion in Josh Kelly with 18 victories, 9 by knockout, 1 defeat, 1 draw. And these are your current champions in the weight division. Now, time to play matchmaking, and all that shit. Mortazaliev was the one that got defeated by Josh Kelly in a fight where, in my opinion, it was nasty. I did not like the outcome of it. There was at least 2 times, but in my opinion, there was 3 times where Josh Kelly got dropped and should have been counted for, and he didn't get counted. They ruled it a slip. They ruled it a no drop. And those were vital points that could have had him, at the very most, been a draw, and, Mortazaliev still been champion. I'm not saying this because I want Mortazaliev to still be champion. I'm just saying what's fair is fair. Josh Kelly was running the whole night. He dropped Mortazaliev in a bad stance. Mortazaliev didn't get hurt. He was just in a bad stance and got hit hard in a bad stance. Same thing happened to Josh Kelly. But then there was 2 to 3 other times that happened to Josh Kelly the same way. 2 of them were actual hits that you could see that hurt him, and they just weren't counted. The ref didn't count them. They said it was a slip, and boom, and even like that, it was still a split decision victory for Josh Kelly. So, in my opinion, in terms of the IBF belt and what its champion should do, is a mandatory fight, which, as the timing of this video, hasn't come out yet, but it is stated that Mortazaliev and his team are very much pushing for that to be the case, for the IBF to kind of force Josh Kelly to give Mortazaliev a rematch instead of fighting someone else. Then you have Xander Zayas, who his latest victories crowned him the only unified champion in the division currently so far, holding not only the WBO, which was his belt, but also taking Abras Barrao's WBA belt in a very intense but yet tactical performance by Xander Zayas in Puerto Rico, where he proceeded to obviously, as he usually does, call out everybody, saying he doesn't care who it is, what belts they have, what belts they don't have. He's ready for them all, you know? But between the champions, Josh Kelly and Xander Zayas have mentioned both of each other's names. Josh Kelly obviously fought the same day as Xander Zayas, but due to time zones, Josh Kelly was in the morning for Xander Zayas, and Xander Zayas was in the nighttime of the same day. So they both know that the other guy won. So for example, Xander Zayas knew that Josh Kelly had just became world champion the same day he was gonna go fight his unification bout. And after Josh Kelly's interview, Josh Kelly said, "I know Xander Zayas is gonna win. I'll be down to fight Xander Zayas for a unification bout." So those two would be an interesting fight. Obviously, it would probably take place in the UK. It would just be bigger venue for them. But in my opinion, it's a very dangerous thing for Xander Zayas, especially the way Josh Kelly was able to get the IBF title from Mortazaliev. Like I said, there was at least two times, but in my opinion, there was 3 times. They should have counted some knockdowns for Josh Kelly, and they didn't, and those saved them in the points. So in order to not, have that, you could be like neutral grounds, Josh Kelly versus Xander Zayas in Houston or in fucking Vegas, and as the co-main event or in the undercard of some other big fight in Vegas. But in my opinion, that would be a good fight. I would love to see them fight. They are also both the only current world champions in the division that can fight each other. Like I said, Sebastian Fundora is already locked in a fight with Keith Thurman, a fight he was supposed to have back, I believe, late October, early November, but due to a bicep injury that he retained during training camp, they had to extend that motherfucker. So now he's fighting all the way into March. So he's out of the question. Same thing with his belt. WBC is out of the question for anybody trying to do anything with him. So the only other belts that are available to try to grab are the IBF, the WBA, and the WBO. And between those 3 belts, they are within 2 people. And those 2 people have shared interest in wanting to fight each other. And in my opinion, that would be a banging fucking fight. Like I said, you could be neutral ground somewhere in Las Vegas or in Texas, maybe LA. But I realistically see it probably being like a co-main event fight or part of a super card somewhere in Vegas or in Saudi Arabia, just so it could be like, neutral ground for both fighters. No one could really get the one up the other. Now, what is for Josh Kelly? Like I said, my opinion, Mortazaliev should be his number one option. That's what I would do. And then if he comes out, victorious in a more, you know, in a better way, that's good for him. Mortazaliev beats him. Mortazali reclaims back his boogeyman status in a way. And then obviously to the right, you have, like how I explained earlier, you have the newly and one and only so far unified champion at 154, who's also been talking about him and wanting to fight him. So these two are his biggest bets, in my opinion, that he should probably do. Obviously, I feel like maybe the one that is gonna happen, like more likely, is probably not even gonna be these two guys. It's probably just gonna be some IBF ranked guy that they're gonna pull out of nowhere. Um, Fight in Josh Kelly's hometown, in front of his peeps, in front of his whole barrio and his neighborhood, and then look good, and then call out a big name and try to go for those big fights, as it typically does when a newly crowned champion becomes champion. They typically give him a welcome home fucking fight. So, but these are, in my opinion, the two best options for him. Now, what is next for Zayas? Same thing. Josh Kelly, we already talked about it. Josh Kelly has talked about being interested in that fight with Xander Zayas. Xander Zayas has been interested in that fight with Josh Kelly because they are both world champions. But the interesting thing that has come out about possibly the future for Xander Zayas in 2026 is Devin fucking Haney for some reason. Devin fucking Haney for some reason has come up in the conversation pretty intensely to fight Xander Zayas. Now, this all started with the comments of Bill Haney, obviously. For those who are new to my channel, I don't know if I talked about it a lot. I'm not a big fan of Bill Haney. Uh, I'm not a big fan of Bill Haney because I feel like some of the things he does by himself shouldn't be doing at all. And then there are things that I feel like Devin Haney does because of his father that I don't think is the right move to do at all. And same thing, Bill Haney's being interviewed, and he just started yapping about how he didn't even say like, "Oh, my son beat Xander Zayas. Like that's an interesting fight that I want to have in the future for my son." Yada yada. No, he just straight up said that motherfucker is food for my son. He's food. He's nothing. Easy 2 stripes at 154 for my son. Basically, is what he's saying. And Xander obviously is not fucking with that shit. Then Haney tweeted out, like, rhetorically being like, "Oh, Zaya's got 2 belts?" Question mark. Like being like, "Oh, like, he got 2 belts, so now it's interesting to go up and try to fight him, as opposed to when he only had one or he didn't have any." So that led into a segment of tweets where, you have Xander Zayas saying, he's a diva, he's a crybaby. He got punched in the face by Ryan, and then he turned around to sue, yada yada. But the interesting thing for me that he said is that Devin in retweeting that said, "Motherfuckers say anything but get in the ring with me, make the fight." He's saying motherfuckers be yapping their mouth, but when it comes to making the fight, they don't be talking at all. And the response that Zayas gave to that is what interests me more. He said, "I already told your daddy, Bill Haney, I already told your daddy that if my people and I can't make the fight happen between me and Josh Kelly, aka the man to your left, the other champion at 154, if I can't make the unified fight between me and Josh Kelly, you're the number one on my list." Basically saying the number one guy on my list that we're even actively negotiating with is Josh Kelly. We are actively negotiating and trying our best with Josh Kelly. He's the number one priority, the number one guy on my hit list. But if that doesn't work out, I'll waste no time and I'll make you my number one guy on my hit list, and we'll work out the details with you and your team. I like that. I like that idea. Because in my opinion, there's a shit ton of things Haney has to do at 147, because he looks good at 147. And I feel like his body can make 147 pretty good, pretty comfortably, consistently. And also, I feel like 154 is too big for him. We'll have to see if his skills can transition and be enough to stay alive at 154, let alone thrive. But in my opinion, I don't know. He looks a little too small for 154. But then you also had like there's just so much things at 147, and the cherry on top, his body seems to be comfortable at 147. So your body's comfortable at 147, and you still have so much things to do. Like for example, you have the Rolly fight. The Rolly fight is still a banging money fight that will be everywhere. It will sell tickets, and guess what? Rolly has a strap too, so you fools will be unifying. Then you have your arch nemesis in Brian Garcia, who's possibly going to get a strap in your weight class. So when you fight him, it's not only for the revenge of, oh, he was cheating by using steroids, quote unquote, when he fought me, but when you beat him, it's like it's one step closer to being undisputed, and I just became unified with him. It was a champion versus champion this time around. You know, whether he fights Rolly first or he fights Ryan and then Rolly, or Rolly and then Ryan, like either way, those are big money fights that would sell out a lot, and they have straps involved. At that point, what do you have left? You just have one UK fight for the IBF belt. I guess go to the UK and fight it, and you become undisputed, and then you could probably defend it against someone like Conor Benn. Big money fight right there. Then Shakur obviously would be probably intrigued to go up to 147 for undisputed. Big money fight right there. Devin Haney, undisputed champion at 147, defending his status against Shakur Stevenson, who's coming up in weight. Big fucking fight right there. Teofimo Lopez said he's coming up to 147 after his crushing defeat to Shakur Stevenson. You could defend your belts or your undisputed status against someone like Teofimo Lopez. Not only would that give you credit, but that's another big money. Like, there's so much shit. I could go on and on about 147. As a matter of fact, spoiler for the fucking future. The next video I do about like something similar like this, about like the future of a weight division, and like me trying to be like matchmaking, 147 is next, because my opinion, 147 was one of the weakest divisions, but now it's starting to look very good, especially when you have guys at 140 who are willing to come up to 147, the newly guys who are now at 147. Like, it's just a very good weight division now, very good weight division. And Devin Haney alone has a lot of shit he can do that are both legacy and fame and money wise. Like I said, these are big mega payday fights that go with legacy. So in my opinion, I think Haney shouldn't really be looking up for those fights with Xander Zayas or anybody at 147. I mean at 154. I think he should stick around and try to see what he could do at 147. Like, for example, Rolly Romero supposedly was in negotiations to fight Pacquiao, but then he has negotiations of defending his mandatory. Okay, that belt's not available right now. Then you have Ryan Garcia fighting Mario Barrios, WBC World Championship status. That's happening soon. That's happening in a week. All you gotta do is wait for that. That's happening less than a week by the time this video fucking comes out. So all you have to do is just wait for that. And if you don't want to wait, you have the IBF belt, who nobody's actively said that they want to fight him yet. So you have so much things to do. And if you don't feel like doing a unification bout, you got guys like Conor Benn, Shakur Stevenson, Teofimo Lopez willing to come up. Devin Haney could probably make a deal to fucking fight Manny Pacquiao. There's still so much to do at 147 before he could even start considering the possibility of trying to be a 4-weight division world champion. But enough of fucking Zayas. What is next for Fundora? The Towering Inferno. Now, like I said, we already know what's next for him. It's the rescheduling of Sebastian Fundora facing off Keith one-time Thurman, who's 31 victories, 23 by knockout, 1 loss to the legend Manny Pacquiao, and 0 draws. So this is a 12-round fight for Sebastian's WBC world title. It was originally scheduled for October 25th of 2025, but due to Sebastian suffering a hand injury during his training camp leading up to the fight, it got postponed, and they finally landed on a new date which is March 28th of this year. Both fighters claim that they are still good, that they're still ready, and that the time extra that they've had because of the hand injury that Sebastian suffered has only made them more confident in their abilities and in their game plan, and more confident in the victory that they will have against the other guy. You know, Key said that's just more training and more me getting used to fighting taller guys. Sebastian said that's just me being able to study him more, get used to his style, and just implement better strategies during fighting. You know, so both guys are feeling pretty comfortable, pretty cocky about their ability to fight one another. Now, while the champions figure out what they want to do and all that, like I said, the division is fucking stacked to the point where even non-champions are still mega fights. And obviously, the biggest non-champion fight between two fighters who are not world champions is John Boots Ennis versus Virgil Ortiz. It just has to happen. It just has to happen. I mean, the only belt in line is Virgil's WBC interim title belt. But other than that, all it is just respect and credit. Street cred, that's all that's online. Virgil beats someone like Boots, fuck, he skyrockets his career to the stratosphere. And he becomes the A side for any fucking fight he gets into. Even possibly, even if he's not even, even if he's like going up against a world champion, he's still probably gonna be an A side guy. Same thing with Boots. Boots beats someone like Virgil. Like if Virgil beats Boots, but he beats him by beating him up and possibly even stopping him, phenomenal for his career. Boots, on the other hand, if he could beat up, outbox, dominate, frustrate, and maybe even at times hurt Virgil, even if it still goes the distance, but he just outclasses him in general, like how Shakur did to Teofimo. That does phenomenal for Boots' career. Stratosphere, same thing. He becomes the A side even against champions, possibly. Especially like Josh Kelly and Xander Zayas. The only one I possibly see that they probably will have trouble trying to figure out who's A side is probably against Sebastian Fundora. Especially if he could come out of a good knockout victory against Keith Thurman. So, my opinion, this fight has just got to happen. It's still negotiations. Obviously, the drama of, both fighters being, agreeing on fighting, and then Oscar fucking pulling out, and then Virgil suing to get out of his Golden Boy contract. The whole fucking shebang. It's still up. So, we don't know what the future of these two fighters is going to be looking like. But I hope they're still pushing that their next fight is against the guy that they're staring at. Boots focusing on Virgil, Virgil focusing on Boots. Now, matchup to your right was actually a matchup that was supposed to happen, but Madrimov got sick and they had to cancel that fight. But he was supposed to fight Bohachuk at the end of 2024. That like 6 months, no, like 7 month to 8 month segment for Madrimov was just fucking crazy. You had, I think it was like July or August, where he fights Terrence Bud Crawford. He loses, but he looks super good, and he makes possibly the second or tied for the first best performance against Crawford. And then in December, he was gonna fight Bohachuk. Crazy machine, crazy dangerous top 10 guy at 154. The only reason it doesn't happen, he gets sick. But then in February, he comes back and he fights Virgil. So, Madrimov is consistently showing you he's that guy. Now, obviously, he's had a comeback fight not so long ago, probably like a month or two, and it was pretty ass. It was against just fucking this nobody. Madrimov dominated the fuck out of him, but he was fighting pneumonia leading up to the fight, so, there's that. But in my opinion, both of these fighters are in a position where they both need a fight of this level, and more specifically a victory. Bohachuk, like I said, Madrimov lost against Virgil Ortiz, took a while off, and then his comeback fight, it was against a fucking nobody, whatever. Bohachuk had a loss against Virgil, a victory over some nobody, and then he tried having a rematch with the one and only guy before Virgil, there was one guy who beat him at 147. Guy moves up to 154, fights Bohachuk, and beats him again. So, that's Bohachuk's fucking kryptonite. Is that motherfucker? I forgot his name, but it's some black fool who's really good, really underrated. Um, but that motherfucker. That motherfucker is Bohachuk's kryptonite. But in my opinion, Ukrainian versus I forgot what Kazakhstanian, I think Madrimov is. You know, it's just Eastern European motherfuckers going at it. One more skillful than the other, one more powerful than the other. One has more power and durability, the other one has more agility and athleticism and technicism. But both are so good at a level. It would be a beautiful fight, beautiful fight. Obviously, I don't see this probably being a main event fight. It could be, but in order to sell good, I think it would have to probably be like the co-main event or in the undercard of a big mega fight. But I feel like both men. I mean, they were already in negotiations and they already had the fight going. It's just that Madrimov had to cut out because he got sick. So in my opinion, especially now, Madrimov has one comeback fight that he won, but he didn't look too good because he had pneumonia and it was against a nobody. And Bohachuk hasn't fought since his loss. So I don't know. That would be a banging fight. Now, part two of the other top guys was they should do. To your left, you have Tim Tszyu, Timothy Tszyu versus Lubin. Now, both fighters are in the stages of their career where they're starting to look like they really need a win to come back or even stay in the position that they are. And a loss would just send them back. But a win over somebody of their name, like Lubin winning someone over like Tim Tszyu, will keep them pretty high at 154. It will keep them in the talks. In the talks for like fights with like, I could see him fighting like someone like Keith Thurman, Earl, probably Charlo again, trying to get his revenge on Charlo. Charlo hasn't fought in a long time. Possibly fighting Boots, stuff like that. So Tim Tszyu also in the other corner, beating someone like Erickson Lubin, he could use a win like that to try to come back to the mainstream here in the U.S. and America, like he was when he was WBO champion. He was getting ready to fight Keith Thurman, and when he fought Sebastian Fundora, and he gave that fucking fight of the year contender fight, all that. Now, Tszyu, since his second loss to Sebastian Fundora, has had one fight. But in my opinion, the reason it took forever for him to fight is because he decided that, in a good move in my opinion, to redo his whole corner. And now he's fighting with a new corner, and he wanted to get like a test run with them in Australia, comeback fight in Australia with the new team, try to get the rhythm of stuff. In my opinion, he could do one more fight like that and then try to come back to the US and have a fight in the US with someone like Erickson Lubin. Now, on the right, you have your boy Avras Barao versus Ioannis Tellez. Now, these fools already fought. Like I said, Barao only became world champion because he was interim champ. Well, that was this fight. Barao's fought Tellez for the WBA interim title belt. And then, obviously, when Crawford got stripped, they just elevated Barao to WBA World Championship status. Now, Barao just came out of a pretty dominant loss. Like, they dominated him pretty bad in Puerto Rico in his unification bout with Xander Zayas. So he just lost not so long ago, 31st of January. And on the other hand, Tellez has been improving since his fight. His one and only loss to Barao. And ever since, he's been improving and looking good in his fights after the loss, he has been calling out Barao and saying that he wants the rematch, that he wants to avenge his loss, and that he could do it now. That he feels confident in his abilities and his skills that he could do it. But like I said, Barao obviously needs a bounce back fight what better way to do it against Teles, who's another top up and coming guy at 154, and then possibly be on the lookout for someone like, I don't know, like Lubin. Be on the lookout for someone like Tim Zhu. Tim Zhu and him are ex-world champions. They could fight ex-world champions. He could possibly be a good matchup for someone like Boots. I mean, Barao is an underrated guy. He hits pretty solid, and he's a coming forward wrecking machine. It'll be pretty tough for anybody to fight him. So, in my opinion, that would be banging. Now, my favorite out of this whole matchup making thing is the Texas Showdown, is what I call it. Rumble in Texas, the Texas Showdown. The two Rangers going at it, whatever you want to call this event. But the two prides of Texas, the Truth, Arrow the Truth Spence Jr. versus Charles the Twin Lion. Just facing off against each other. Now, in my opinion, this is perfect for both fighters. Perfect. Like, you really can't make this better unless they do that bullshit of fighting in the same card against other guys, but setting up their fight. Like, oh, we'll fight early in the year, the same night, in the same card against other guys. And if we both win our fights, later in the year we'll fight each other. But we have to win our fights. That shit that they do? They could do that, and if they both win their fights and, it goes good, that's the only way it would be bigger. But in my opinion, it's already a big fight, especially if you do it in Texas, where they're both the pride of. And it's just because both fighters haven't fought in years, man. Years. They both keep training, though. They both keep teasing their comebacks. Especially Charlo, like, he was like, Charlo, like, I forgot when it was a couple months ago, where he, like, posted these photos, because obviously he's, quote-unquote, the lion. He's a twin lion, so he posted several photos of, like, a lion eating a giraffe, symbolizing that he's down to fight Sebastian Fundoras, tall as. He had a lion chewing on a boot because he was down to fight João Butenis. They call Virgil the bull. Virgil's like El Toro. So he had a picture of a lion eating a bull. All that. And I remember what he had for Earl, but I remember he did have something for Earl. So, and they're both from PBC. They're both from the same stable. Like I said, they both haven't fought in years. They're so closely alike. They're both from PBC. They're both from Texas. They're both similar weight and height and all that. Then you have both of them. Their last fight was their biggest fight of their careers, and they got brutally beat. Especially Earl. Earl got more beat. Charlo went up to 168 to fight Canelo, where Canelo just beat him from post to post and made him look scared. Made Charlo look scared of engaging. Then you have Spence, who got brutally fucking beat until he got stopped against Crawford. And ever since those defeats that these fools had, they haven't fought, and that was years ago. Like, for both fighters, it was like 3-4 years ago almost. So it's like, and then like I said, they both keep training, they both keep teasing their comebacks. They don't say when, but they just say like, hey, don't count me out, and like soon. So it's just like, they're so perfect in the sense of like how similar they are. It would be a mega fucking fight. It would be a mega fight in Texas where they could be the main event as their comeback fights against each other. But enough about them. On the right, you have the man who is deemed the WC number one 154-pound guy, Mbakari Samakis, some French food. And the guy to your left is Brandon Adams. Now, Brandon Adams is Bohachuk's kryptonite. Brandon Adams is the guy who keeps beating Bohachuk. He beat him twice already. One before and one after Virgil. The second time he beat Bohachuk, it was more convincingly. It was a lot I mean, Bohocek was barely surviving that fucking match. But Samake is currently the number one WC ranked fighter, below obviously the interim title holder, which is Virgil Ortiz. Um, and Adams is ranked number two. So you have the number one and the number two guy below the champion and below the interim champ. I mean, what else do you want? This fight could be used as an eliminator fight for a mandatory spot. I mean, you have these two fights. The winner between them two fights Virgil's interim title, and then boom, you have a fucking mandatory for the winner of Sebastian Fundora and Keith Thurman. Boom, simple as that. In my opinion, this would elevate both of their guys' status because they're pretty high ranked, but nobody knows who they really are at 154. Unfortunately, in my opinion, and that sucks. That sucks. That really sucks. So, I just think like a fight like this would, like, especially if you put this fight pretty high up in the card of like a big fight, it could really help their careers out and try to show to the audience that don't really know them that hey, they're a force at 154 and they are high ranked, so that they people could begin to help them in being like, hey, we should push for Samake to get a shot at one of these top guys, or for Adams to get a shot at one of these big guys, stuff like that. But the interesting part is that this was gonna be the original ending of my video, but while making the video and editing, this came out in the breaking news from Mike Carpenter that the reliable Mark Carpenter stated that in the ring show that they have, that he was informed from reliable sources that serious negotiations, not finished, nothing confirmed, but pretty confirmed. I don't know how to explain it, but you get what I mean. For Tim Tszyu to face Earl Spence Jr. in the summer of this year. It's also stated that Tim, um, not only did he agree to fight Earl in the summer, but he stated that he would like to have a tuna fight before fighting Earl. So he's probably gonna be fighting in a month or two. Maybe in Australia, like I said, he'll have another fight in Australia where he looks good. Or he'll probably be fighting some other guy. But he specifically stated like, okay, I'm down to fight Earl, but I want to have a tune-up fight in a month or two before fighting him in the summer. I will fight him in the summer. Now, nothing said for Earl though. Like Earl hasn't said like, oh, I want to tune up as well, or anything. It's just pretty much both men haven't said anything, but it's from reliable sources that both fighters are scheduled, pretty much almost done deal scheduled for the summer in a mega showdown. Now, both fighters, in my opinion, like we've been talking about Tim Tszyu and Earl in other matchmaking fights that I came up with, they both need a fucking win of this magnitude. And Tim beating someone like Earl would be good for his career. And Earl, in his comeback fight, not only is his first fight in since his crushing defeat, his one and only defeat, but it was 3 years ago, and he is fighting for the first time in a new weight class, and he manages to beat someone like Tim Tszyu without a tune-up to get used to the weight or to get back in the rhythm of stuff. I would be fucking phenomenal for the return of Earl, the true Spence Jr. I think it would benefit Earl more to beat Tim than it would be for Tim to beat Earl, because I feel like if Tim beats him, especially by like knockout or something, I feel like fools are just gonna discredit him and be like, yeah, but Earl hasn't fought in years. He's in a new weight class, and the last time he fought not only was it years ago in a different weight class below, but he got his ass whooped. He hasn't been the same since that accident. Yada yada. Like I feel like it will be not as big of a victory win for Tim Tszyu as it is for Earl, but it will still be a very big win, especially to come back to America, to the U.S. for Tim to beat someone like Earl. I said he beat someone like Earl, then he beat someone like Lubin in the U.S. and undercards and stuff like that. He's popping. That fool's popping. That fool's back. Then you reschedule the fight, whether Keith Thurman wins or loses against Fundora. I mean, they were already scheduled a fight before. How hard can it be to schedule another fight between Keith Thurman and Tim Tszyu? Tim Tszyu beating Earl Spence, then beating Lubin, then beating Keith, all three back to back to back. I mean, that would make wonders for his career, his legacy, and also for his his selling here in the U.S. will be big. So, in my opinion, this will affect Oscar de la Hoya, as he was heavily stating that the reason he wasn't too caring or too into the idea of Virgil versus Boots, as you know as Matchroom's Eddie Hearn was, because in his eyes, oh, Virgil is the A side and he has a multitude of big fights, just as big if not bigger. And he stated that obviously the number one fight that he stated for Virgil was a Texas showdown, since Virgil's from Texas as well, was a Texas showdown in Cowboy Stadium between Earl Spence Jr. and Virgil Ortiz. But obviously, if Earl Spence is occupied in the moment training for the summer clash between him and Tim Tszyu, what excuse does Oscar have now to not really make the fight between Virgil Ortiz and Boots Ennis? So that's it. That's all I have for you guys. I'm sorry I yapped longer than I wanted to. I just really want to get my thoughts out. This is a new type of video thing that I want to do for my channel, where I come up with scenarios and the future of the 150, of a division, and what interesting things should happen between the contenders, prospects, and champions, and all that, and just kind of see what I get right, see what I get wrong, or you know. But in my opinion, let me know what you guys think about these type of videos. And yeah, after you have long enough, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch. If you're new or you just haven't yet, please hit subscribe. That really helps out. And make sure you like. Thank you very much. Have a good one.